All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry for the delay. Just had a few technical issues on my end, but everything seems to be working fine. Um, it's nice to meet you all. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jillian Wang, and I'm the president of KIDA. And with me, I do have a few secretariat members who are joining me for this lecture. That's going to be given by Brandon Zhang on how to prep effectively. So while we're waiting for a few more people to come and join us, I'd like to ask the secretariat to please conduct like a brief head count of how many people are in the Zoom versus how many people are have signed up so that we could quickly maybe send them a friendly reminder to be able to join the lecture. We could perhaps give it like about 3 to 5 minutes. Okay, let's see. I've given I've given permission to screen share, so I think then in that case, Brandon could probably be the one to be in control of the slides and to be sharing everything with us. Um, I'd really appreciate it if we could turn our cameras on during the lecture itself. I don't think we don't need to now, but once the lecture starts, I'd really appreciate it if we could all turn on our cameras to be present and listening to the lecture. Um, but let's see for the head count.
I think we sent the email to 15 people and there's currently seven. So maybe we just wait a bit more.
All right. Yeah, we could definitely wait a bit more. I'm getting a message that I'm occasionally cutting out. Is it my network or is it um the
Oh,
other and that's am I like audible to you guys?
you're audible to me.
Oh,
Oh,
okay, that's good. Yeah, so if we only have seven so far, we should definitely wait. I'll go ahead and send a reminder in the KIDA Council group chat. Um,
sounds good.
yeah. But I think to avoid any further delays, we should probably start around 12, start at around in around 2 minutes probably. Um, because we don't want to kind of take up too much time by waiting for the people to come join us. So yeah, probably at around 12:12, I'll just let Brandon start the lecture. And anyone else who just joins or just happens to join, they were supposed to join at around when the Zoom meeting started anyway. So, um, yeah, Brandon, your camera is coming up as a gray screen on my end. I don't think you're visible. Yep. Okay. And could I please ask the planning and development team, just for good measure, to send a reminder to the people who haven't joined yet, either via email or if you just have their Kakao Talk, if you have their Kakao Talk, you could just probably DM them. That would probably be good.
I'll send an email right now and then I'll cacao the people that I have.
Yeah, perfect. think in that case, since it's already 12:12 and we've taken enough time waiting for certain people already, I think Brandon, I'll give the reins over to you to be able to start your lecture at your own pace. So um yeah, pretty sure I enabled screen sharing for all. If you could just share your slides, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm able to get the camera to work, so we'll just have to proceed with that. But I think it should be okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
Um, where's this? Can you please confirm that my presentation is visible?
Yes, we can see it.
Wonderful. Alrighty. First and foremost, I apologize for having my camera working. I'm actually not quite sure why. I was just in a meeting this uh, I'll be on prep time and effectively. This is something and so to be able to talk about it is something that I'm quite interested and very excited to do. Before I begin, just a little bit about myself. I am currently a debater at the Hart House Debating Club at the University of Toronto in Toronto, Canada. I have represented the University of Toronto on two occasions at the World Championships, as well as various other tournaments in not only Canada but worldwide as well. Very recently, I was just judging at UADC. Now, the way the schedule sort of works for today is going to be first and foremost the lecture about prep time. Afterwards, I have a few activities that we're going to be doing. Uh, they are quite short, so that we have time at the end to be able to also run around. In total, it should be close to 2-ish hours. Uh, and so that's sort of what you'll expect from today's presentation. Wonderful. Let's get started. First and foremost is a table of contents and what to expect. First, we're going to go over sort of what the goals of prep time actually are, and how you should be trying to sort of think about it before you even go into any rounds. Then we're going to talk about the actual structure of prep in and of itself, how time breakdown works, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, and going over just a very brief rationale as to why you are doing what you are doing. Next, we'll quick chat about the differences between opening and closing and the sort of nuances between them, as well as a few tips and tricks about prep, not only for back half, but also just in general as well. Then we'll close off the lecture section with just a few exercises that we'll do within the people that are here. And then I assume somebody will get the draw and the motion and we'll go up and running with a round. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I do have the chat pulled up on my screen. So, oh, hmm, is this better? Hello, testing,
Yes, I
testing,
think
1, 2, 3.
I think it's definitely more stable. Thank you, Brandon.
Okay, perfect. Um, yeah. Okay. Just out of curiosity, were you able to catch most of what I just said before, or would you like me to restart?
It was kind of choppy at the introduction, but I did know that it was just like, oh, a brief description of what the theme was. So I don't think anything material was specifically left out. I think now we're able to understand you and listen and hear what you
Okay.
have to say. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's fine then. Sounds good. So yeah, the again, this is the sort of schedule for today. We'll go over the goals of prep time, structure, opening versus closing exercises. If anybody has any questions at any time, please feel free to just put it in the chat. I have it pulled up on the right side of my screen. Uh, so if you have any questions, I will just be able to answer them. Hello, can you hear me? Someone says they can't hear things clearly. Testing, testing. Oh, and they left.
Oh, that
Okay,
means that probably it was their
that
network.
means probably their problem. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, and I will do my best to answer or as quickly as I can. Alrighty, well, let's get started first and foremost with the goals of prep. But before I do this, I just want to very quickly ask the crowd, not as a looking for answers thing, but just to think to yourselves. Because more often than not, a lot of debaters just sort of turn their brains off when it comes to prep, where everybody knows that prep is the 15 minutes or 30 minutes before a round where you're just supposed to come up with arguments. But a lot of people don't really think about what the actual goals are and just going right into brainstorming arguments. And I think that's the wrong way to go about things. Because I think when you have goals that you have set out beforehand, and obviously they're going to probably differ depending on the format or how experienced you are. But I think just having a set of goals to be able to think back to try to achieve, is a very good grounding point. Because when you have this idea of what you think is a successful prep versus a rather unsuccessful prep, you're able to do sort of two things. Number one is what I mentioned earlier. You're better able to ground yourself in discussions and things like ideas. But secondly, and more importantly, you're able to look back on your prep time and critically analyze what you actually did and what you should have done. Because if you think about what happens after a round, and this is especially the case when you lose, or you take a four, you take three, something like this. Oftentimes, you blame things like strategy, but it's things that you come up in the round. So, for example, oh, I missed this mechanism, or oh, I didn't weigh this enough, or oh, that's a really good argument. I should have thought of that. And this often gets accredited to things that happen in the round, where I think a lot of this is something that should be done before the round. So that's the sort of context I want you to go into this part of this lecture with. Now, what are the goals of prep? There are four things that I think are very important. Number one is the stance of your team. The stance is a very broad term, and it's meant to be broad because it's sort of just trying to describe what the general direction of your case is. The second thing is the burdens. Now, people describe this in very different ways depending on who you ask. But the general idea of a burden is to say, okay, this is our motion. What is it that we need to prove in order to succeed in this round? If it's a motion about limiting the use of drugs, what is the goal? Is it to get drugs off the street? Or is it something further than that? Is it to ensure that people living within a certain population are unenticed by drugs in the first place? And we'll go over this in more detail later when we get to the example. But the burden in general is just something you should be keeping in your mind at all times. Third thing to note is strategy. Now, strategy is broken down into two main sectors, I guess. The first is general case strategy, right? What is your arguments going to be? How are you planning on, organizing your speech? But then the second one is team strategy. Who's speaking first? Who's speaking second? Who is saying what? Am I going to be doing a majority of the refuting, or is my partner going to be doing the majority of the refuting? Strategy comes down to a lot of things, and we'll go over that in a second. The last thing to note is expectations. And expectations come in two forms. Number one is very explicit. Number one is just what arguments do I think opposition is going to run? But number two is how do I deal with these arguments? Because every team will probably have arguments that are quite good. And so knowing what to expect and doing your best to be able to preemptively think, okay, if they say this, how should our strategy shift? How does this affect our case? These are all important things that you should know going into the round that you should be discussing in prep time. Okay, this is an example of what it would sort of look like. Oh, sorry. This is an example of what it would sort of look like to go over the things that we talked about. First, on the model. right? The model, if we go back to the last slide, is akin to the stance that we are trying to take in the round. Because if you think about the role of a model, it is obviously to outline what the terms of a debate mean. But it's a little bit more than that, because it's also trying to explain what it is that you're trying to do with this motion. And that sets up for all of the things downstream of that, what your arguments are going to look like, what your burdens are going to look like. So when you have a model that says in this example, for this household implement a carbon tax, what does that actually look like, right? It looks like perhaps we're going to add any additional taxes. So this would probably be things that are already taxed through things like, GST, but then there'd be something that's tacked on top of it as an addition. And it's probably applicable to things like carbon emissions, things that would be probably bad for the environment, which is something that this motion is probably trying to hint at. Now, if you break down that thought process of what I just said, there's a few important things to note. Number one, it's quite rational, right? A lot of the reasons we're doing a lot of the things that the model says can be rationalized in some way or the other. So, for example, it is an additional tax, and presumably that means the goal is to disincentivize people from doing this thing versus something that's only taxed without this sort of additional carbon tax. And so that's where we get into the burden section of this presentation. Because in the burden section, you should be thinking about what you need to prove to win. But in order to know what you need to prove to win, you have to know what the actual policy is going to look like. And in this instance, we can see that the burden says, in this example, we need to prove this policy will lead to greener practices and the environmental benefits outweigh the economic harms. Now, there's two things then from this. First is about the greener policies, and this is something that is independent of any economic harms. If you're able to prove, for example, that a carbon tax on additional things that produce carbon emissions, so for example, whether it be cars or whatever, anything that can be shifted into green energy, if this means that people are now going to shift into the cleaner version, that's probably quite good. Because that means the policy that you're trying to implement in this instance is working. That means that by proving the policy works, you have now been able to prove that you will create a better world in the new status quo that you're proposing. And the burden here is just that. It's to prove that this will create a better world. The second part is that it outweighs any harms versus benefits. Because there's usually a trade-off within debates that must be acknowledged. And this is the other half of the burden. Because it can't just be that you're trying to prove that something is good. You have to prove that it is better than the harms that come from it. It's the same rationale for a minimum wage, for example. Because you think of a minimum wage, the people that are able to benefit from this minimum wage are obviously going to be better off. If you have someone who is working for $7 an hour and now you make the minimum wage $10 an hour, they're obviously going to earn more money. But that's in a vacuum. Obviously, if you increase the minimum wage, companies are likely to have less employees in order to pay the same amount overall because of this increased minimum wage that makes it such that they have to pay more people more money. But the nuance here is that maybe some people are let go of. But if overall everybody except for those people are better off, everyone else is better off, then it's probably still a good policy to have. And the same thing is true for these burdens. You cannot simply argue that something is objectively good. You have to understand the trade-off. So let's summarize. What are the things that you should address when talking about burdens? Number one, what is the goal of this policy, and does this policy reach that goal? And number two, what are the potential consequences, and does it effectively address them? The next thing to note is just on strategy. And often this looks like argumentation. But importantly, this argumentation is based off of your burdens. These arguments in a vacuum mean nothing unless they're contextualized effectively. So in this instance, the two arguments for proposition would be this creates a financial incentive for businesses and customers to be eco-friendly. And the second argument is that environmental consequences would devastate the world if unchecked. And notice how these two arguments address both parts of the burden. The second argument about environmental consequences deals with the first thing to say that greener practices in a vacuum are important and should be something that we care about. Now, very importantly, this argument is very high impact, but if we look at the chance of it happening, it's probably quite low in terms of things that people would care about as well. Because perhaps it's true that environmental devastation is very, very important, but it's very hard to rationalize it, especially when you have people in the short term who are suffering, which is why this first argument is quite important here, right? How this not only creates a chance for environment the environment to be better off, but you give people the incentive to want to do it. That way, it benefits consumers as well because they're able to make greener choices, but it's also the choice that economically makes sense for them as well. Now, the last thing to note here is the expectations of opposition arguments. And the way that this is explained is that you're not trying to make the opposition case. Your goal is not to come up with the same level of prep case depth that yours is. Rather, you just want a general idea of what opposition teams are probably going to run. So in this instance, an expected op could be very simple. It's that things are going to be more expensive for a lot of people, and that's very bad for those who don't make very much money and are probably already on a budget. This would just make it exponentially worse for them. That means, even if on our side we make things a little more green, preserve the planet a little more, opposition probably is going to say, but the people cannot sustain this. The people are unable to actually survive through this short-term harm. And that means you have a sort of idea in your head as to how to weigh against this. The idea that people are suffering is something that should now be incorporated into your case in some way, whether it's through explicit refutation if opposition ends up running this argument, or more commonly, it's built into your own arguments, where when you present your arguments about financial incentives, you include this sort of aspect into it. So you preemptively either refute or weigh against the argument. For example, maybe it's true that things are going to be more expensive, but the degree in which this occurs is very minimal. So maybe gas goes up a few cents instead of what opposition may want to argue, which is that it goes up so much that regular people simply cannot afford it. These are the sort of four goals of prep that I think every team should go into prep understanding. Because when you have a good grasp of these four goals, you're able to compartmentalize everything and make it much easier to understand what you are supposed to prep. So now let's go into what prep actually looks like by looking at the structure of prep time, how you use it. I like to break it down into three separate categories. And very important to note, this breakdown is for BP 15 minutes. I know Asian Parliamentary is 30 minutes, and we'll go over that later on as well. But the structure, for me personally, is very simple. At the start, we'll have 1 to 3 minutes of silent prep. Then you would have 10 minutes of discussion. And at the end, there's sort of the silent writing period where you would spend the rest of your time writing out the case, writing out any pre-refutation you might have, things like that. Now, very importantly, the first and third session have very variable times, but the discussion section is standardized at 10 minutes, and there's a very specific reason for that. When you do discussion with your partner, this is probably one of the most important parts of prep. And so even if your silent prep is a little shorter than you would expect, or if the amount of time spent writing is a little shorter than you would like, it is very important to have the discussion period stay the same. And we'll go over why in the second part of this presentation, or in the second part of this sort of category. But first, I want to talk about the importance of silent prep. Because silent prep seems quite counterintuitive in a activity that is sort of designed to be team oriented. And so the rationale behind silent prep is the same reason why people are inherently different. Because if you consider you and literally anyone else around you, maybe you have the same general ideas when you're seeing anything, right? Maybe if you see a pool, you would want to go swimming. Or if you see a flower, maybe you want to take a picture of it or smell it. But the nuance in how you do things is the reason why silent prep is important. Because maybe your friend wants to cannonball into the pool, but you would rather dive because you know how to swim. You've done competitive swimming. It's these small differences between individual people and how they tackle problems that make silent prep a very important part of debate. And even if you just take a couple of minutes at the start, even a minute is very good because you and your partner are very, very unlikely to come to the exact same idea. You're likely to come up with, at the very least, different approaches to the same problem. And in your case, or in debaters' cases, this would be how arguments are structured. Because even if the core argument is the same, so going back to the last slide, maybe the core argument is still that you want to protect the environment. The ways that you would address this perhaps differ from each person to another. And that sort of nuance is the reason silent prep is so important. Because when we get into our second part, which is the discussion section, that's when you're going to bounce ideas off of each other. And that's when silent prep is really going to pay off. So let's go over this very quickly. Why should you discuss? What is the benefits of it? First, it's just to get on the same page, right? Now, this seems quite counterintuitive when you're first talking about silent prep and having different ideas. But sometimes, to be honest, those ideas are just quite bad. Sometimes your brain works in mysterious ways and you just come up with a bad idea. Discussion is to make sure that through trial and error, you're actually able to get to the same idea of what a good case and a good argument actually is. Plus, it's much harder for the second speaker to do anything effectively, per se, if they have no idea what's going on. So the discussion is not only to narrow down good arguments, but also to just make sure you know what you're talking about. That's the second thing, right? To get the best case, because your partner might see problems with arguments you don't see. And this isn't a problem for you as a debater. It's a problem for humans in general, because people tend to prefer and tend to see themselves as right. And oftentimes, this clouds their judgment, especially when, coming up with arguments and people who are naturally persuasive or naturally good at persuasive speaking. It's very easy for them to get into this sort of mindset of, oh, I'm really good at public speaking. I know good arguments. Therefore, this is surely a good argument. And to be fair, sometimes that's the mindset is right. But there are a lot of instances in which you miss out on certain things that are very catastrophic for your argument. And so just taking the time to talk about these arguments, go through your thought process, go through the premise of your argument, what your impact is, what your mechanisms are, and think, does this argument actually make sense from a third person perspective? Is very important. And having a partner be able to talk to you about it is a key aspect to ensuring that that process goes through very smoothly. The second thing to note about this is, even if your argument is good, doesn't mean that it can't be improved. And that's the second part of this. It's not just being able to say, does this argument make sense? It's to have the best version of the argument to be presented. Just because something is good doesn't mean it can't be better. Lastly, by explaining your ideas, you're sort of practicing your speech in a sense. Because you have to remember that in a round, the judges are also ex-debaters. They're probably people who are quite familiar with the format, or at the very least, have some conception of what is persuasive and what is not. That means you can't just go up, speak gibberish, sit down, and expect them to understand and bow to your every will. You have to be persuasive in some way. And by explaining your sort of ideas to your partner, this is very good because you're effectively just practicing doing what you would be doing in your speech to the judge. If they understand, great. But if they don't know what you're talking about, or if your idea is too complex, that should tell you about this general strategy of this argument, whether it is too complicated or whether it requires a lot of leaps and bounds in order to actually buy it and understand it and be able to impact it. These are all important things that often go underappreciated within prep time. So let's go back to this slide here of silent prep discussion and writing. What does it actually mean? First,
Recording in progress.
oh, yeah. First, in terms of brainstorming, this is when you take time to come up with your own ideas, focus on your own case, and think about arguments that you think are good, burdens that you think are accurate, and what you think should be run. You should also write down your ideas, obviously, but it's important to note that this sort of section doesn't have to be super complicated, doesn't have to be super intricate. It can literally just be the title of your argument. That's all you really need to have. Because in the second step of discussion and case building, that's when you're actually going to fulfill up the vast majority of your argumentation. And it's important here to note that you shouldn't be afraid to try to challenge each other on your opinions, interrupt your partner, ask questions, things like that. Because confidence is something that is very important in debate that is only built up if you're able to actually believe that this argument is good. So if your partner is saying things that you think are, not the best, or you think there's a lot of logical holes, you should interrupt and say, wait, does this work? I don't think this works for this reason. I think we should say this instead. Now, what you will do here is two things. Number one, obviously, is to improve the argument. But number two, is to feel more confident about what you're actually saying in the round and be able to understand how to position these arguments very strategically. The third thing to note here is during the end of the sort of writing section, or sorry, the end of the sort of discussion section, you should start preparing for the round, and that's how we would get into the sort of writing area. This means in the last 2 or 3 minutes, you should be fully flushing out this argument with what you have discussed, right? Now, hopefully, you are both writing while you are discussing, so this isn't something that requires a lot of intense concentration and effort. But you should spend some time just going over what the actual mechanisms, what the actual impacts that you're going to use are. While the first speaker does that, the second speaker should start brainstorming what opposition case is, what the general strategy of op would be, and how to sort of counteract that. So if you think back to the first part, this would be where you would start thinking of examples of opposition cases and arguments. The last thing, and this is literally like the last 30 seconds, even while you're walking to the room, it should be this sort of final check-in process. And the way that this works is not as a discussion, but rather it should be something more cohesive. It should be you two making sure you're on the same page. 99 times out of 10, nothing will change. You'll have the same arguments as when you started talking as after. But it's those 1% chances that you aren't on the same page. You have slightly different conceptions of what the argument is. They're able to reconcile and think, oh, okay. And then use that time to sort of mentally adjust. Because more often than not, you're not changing things that are very drastic. But this final check-in is very important to ensure that your teamwork going into the round is very strong and very cohesive. Okay. Next thing to note is opening versus closing halves. And prepping as a back half team is generally quite similar. But there are 3 important characteristics that you have to watch out for when prepping as a back half team. The first is to spend more time discussing and less time individually prepping. So if you think back, it was say 10 minutes and then 5 or so minutes for individual writing. But when you're in back half, this has to change. Because when you're in front half, you have a sort of pressure that you don't have in back half, that you have to have a coherent case that is ready to go on the spot. Whereas on back half, you have plenty of time to think and adjust. That leads us to the second one. That you should, in general, have more ideas instead of a few fully developed ones. Now, this will be a result of having more time discussing, but why is this something that is important? There are 3 reasons. Number one, oftentimes the first ideas that you have are going to be what we call the most stock arguments. What that basically means is these are the ones that are most logical. These are the ones that first come into people's minds and things that people will generally think of if you ask them about a certain topic. Now, importantly, that means your opening half also has probably thought of these arguments. And so by prepping these very thoroughly, perhaps you have a few that are very flushed out. But the problem with these arguments is that they tend to get used up by opening half teams. And this concept is what we call breadth versus depth. Because if you think of breadth as a net, for example, you come up with a lot of random things. So if you think about fishing, when you cast a big wide net, perhaps you'll catch some fish, but maybe you'll also get random other things like starfish, crabs, a variety of things that can be used. In the same way that ideas can be used if one is already taken. Because opening half will likely choose the more stock arguments, the more logical ones, the more easy to access ones. And so having this expanded variety is very, very important in understanding the round and how it's going to play out, but more importantly, being prepared to shift when you realize that certain arguments are no longer viable. Importantly, this is different than a front half, which is why you have a longer writing period. Where on opening, you would rather prefer a depth of argumentation. Because even though it is easier to think of these arguments, they're likely to be attacked very viciously. Because just because you think of it doesn't mean others won't as well. Which means people will already preemptively know sort of how to respond to these arguments and what the best way to respond is. The last thing to note here is to treat the front half as an extended prep time. Now, this part is very important because oftentimes people take this too literally and don't write anything down from their front half. This is not how you should be doing this. You should do this very strategically. And there are a multitude of ways to do this. I'm going to go over some of them. The first is very simply just to sort of shift the refutation burden from majority in member to more so in whip in terms of weighing. What this does is it allows you to use this opening half time to spend more time preparing for the round. But importantly, you still have refutation to the very key pieces of opening his case. That way, you not only have the benefits of extended prep time, but you still have the level of engagement that you would generally need to win higher level debates. The second thing to note is the importance of understanding when to run an extension that is a vertical extension versus an extension that is completely new. Vertical extensions are when you think opening half has done a poor job explaining a certain argument, and you think there are key things missing from their case that you think by proving you can win out on this argument and basically take all of the credit for it. Whereas a more traditional extension operates as a completely new argument that is independent of any opening half team. When you have this extra time, you're sort of able to decide, right? Does this argument work? Does it not? Should I run it? Should I not? And using this time to think about this is very important because now you have the actually what happens in the round to be able to think about it. It's not just a guess as to what other teams are going to say. You literally know what other teams have run. So this is a very important decision-making time because it allows you to strategically position your case. If you think that this case is very good, even though it is a vertical extension, then now is the time to fully flush out this case. In the same way that if you have a brand new argument that you know opening has not run, this is the time to be able to fully flush this argument out and ensure that it is round winning. And this connects back to the first point of spending more time discussing, less time individually prepping. You can think of it as sort of a makeup period, where because you didn't spend this time during prep, rather you got a more breadth of ideas, you have a little more time during the round itself to make sure that the ideas that you end up using are actually prepped out very well. Because since your discussion periods are going to be so long, it's generally a lot harder to have fully flushed out arguments even by the time the debate begins. And so this is the sort of time to do this. Uh, Before we continue, are there any questions? Okay, wonderful. The last section on opening versus closing is tips and tricks. Now, there are three here. Oh, before I begin. Yeah, there are three here. First, uh, there's meaningful discussion. After silent prep, it's good to talk about what you think your burdens are. Um, but after that, it's important to think about ideas and arguments for framing that could be used later on, right? What you think is strong, and importantly, what are backup arguments, especially if you're in back half. The second thing is time to write, right? Always leave a couple minutes at the end for prep time to write. Otherwise, it's very easy to get tunnel visioned into less developed arguments. And this is also the sort of importance of this last check-in period, where you're able to sort of look at what your partner has written and think, is this what I think is strong, or do I think there should be more? The last thing is to walk and talk. And this is far more applicable to online, or sorry, in-person tournaments, where after the motion drops, you'll probably have a standard set period of time to sort of walk to your rooms before you begin prepping. And to sort of use this time to think about the motion, think about the strategy, and to use this as your sort of silent prep instead of wasting time walking and then going to your silent prep. To sort of multitask as much as possible. Okay. Uh, It appears, unfortunately, because we started a little late, we won't have time for the exercises. But I believe the slides will be posted, and they're very intuitive, they're very simple, and you can do these on your own. This isn't something you would need with a group. So I'll hand it back to Jillian, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much, Brendan, for the lecture. I thought that the tips and tricks were very, very eye-opening, as even though I've been debating for quite a while, there were still a lot of new things that I kind of didn't consider when it came to prep time and how meaningful it actually is. So yeah, we really appreciate you for giving this lecture. Now we're going to be moving on to our sparring session, which will also be judged by Brennan and also a couple of other people who are participating in the lecture and the spar, but they've also chosen to panel instead. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a short 10-minute break and then come back at around just 3 sharp, I believe. And then we can start on with the matchups, which I will be sharing, as well as the motion. So, yeah, the presentation slides will be uploaded on the KIDA public forum if Brandon's okay with that, as well as the recording. I just wanted to check if that's okay with you.
Yep, totally fine.
Oh, all right, perfect. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and take a quick 10-minute break and then come back at 3 sharp. Thank you so much, guys. Hello, everybody. Here, I have shared the matchups with everybody. So if you could please just quickly take a screenshot on your own devices to be able to just get yourself familiar with who you're paired up with, unless you've already um, chosen a partner beforehand. Please make note of this. So we will have OG, Sebastian Zhang from HYDS and Yesong Oh from MKDS. On OO, we have Yu Khan and Hyun Lee from HYDS. Oh, sorry. I forgot to change the things that yeah. On OO we have Yoo Khan and Hyun Lee. On CG, Closing Government, we have Taeyeon and Laiba, both from YAU. And for CO, we have Sumu Oh and Taeyeon Park from both from HYDS. So yeah, please make note of this. I know it's a little bit confusing, but if you just look in the order of just if you just replace it with closing, then that would also make sense. Um, and now I'm gonna go change the window to hang on, I need to move my, let me go and change the window to the motion itself.
Before we release, like, can we wait like 3 minutes? I'm in a taxi right now, and also I don't think my partner is here.
All right, yeah. So yeah, we can go ahead and wait 3 minutes before we release the matchups and for I mean before we start the motion release. In the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and change the uh team names from OG to CG and to CO.
Yeah, so sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, please just let me know as soon as your partner arrives and you're ready to.
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely.
All right. Right. Seeing as it is 3:07, I'm going to go ahead and release the motion. So let me just, all right, slideshow. So the motion is, yeah, can everybody see my screen? Right.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Yeah, the motion for our sparring this week will be this house supports the dominant narrative that individuals should do what they love. The matchups have been shared, and I hope you're all familiar with your partners. And I will be opening the breakout rooms now. So open all rooms. And yeah, debaters, please just go to your designated breakout room and then come back. If we have around 15 minutes to prep, since this is BP, we're gonna go ahead and come back at 1:23 where the debate starts. So yeah, good luck. Just to make sure everybody is able to join the breakout rooms, right? Oh yeah, they're starting to join. Okay, perfect. So let's come back at 3:23. Brandon, are you there?
Yeah, what's up?
Oh yeah, we just wanted to ask if you were able to stay probably like 5 minutes after the Zoom meeting because we want to discuss like the payment for you
Yeah, sure.
for
No worries. Yeah.
yeah. All right. Thank you. That's perfect.
Actually,
Oh,
we can also
yeah.
do it now while they're prepping.
We could do a what? Sorry?
We can do it now while they're prepping.
Oh yeah, yeah, probably this would probably be best. So our treasurer does our treasury, I mean, we do have a
Mhm.
PayPal account, but we also heard that a lot of debaters have recently, like overseas debaters for new remuneration, have also been using Wise. So we were wondering which one would be more convenient for you.
I prefer Wise.
Wise, okay, perfect. Yeah, so because we originally thought of three options, either PayPal, Wise, or because we did come into contact with you through a referral from Junso
June, right? Yeah.
Yonsei.
Mhm.
So I wasn't sure if which payment method you would prefer, like maybe either through him or but if your preferred is Wise, then we can totally arrange that for you.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah.
be cool. I could just send you my QR code.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. If you could just email the KIDA Secretariat, the KIDA Secretariat your Wise QR code, we can send the money to you as soon as like we wrap up with this lecture.
Great.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. I just sent the email to the KIDA secretary.
All right, thank you so
Can you please
much.
confirm that you've got it? Just because
Let's see.
sending it from the app doesn't
Yeah,
quite work for me.
yep, hang on. Um, yeah, we got it. Thank
Perfect.
you.
And just to confirm, the payment is in Korean won, right?
Yes, it will be in Korean.
Perfect. Yeah. Because I'm going to Seoul next weekend, so
Oh, perfect.
I will use that then. All right. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. We still have one more person who's currently, oh, never mind. Okay. Everybody is now in the main room. This means that we can officially start the debate. Our panelist for today is surprisingly not surprisingly is not in the Zoom room, which is a little odd, but um I think I encourage all observers of the debate to just maybe be able to also pitch in and maybe give their own takes later during the end of Brandon's OA at the end of the debate. With that being said, I'll pass the mic on to Brandon to be able to, yeah, start the sparring.
Alrighty. Thanks everyone for coming. One quick note before we begin the round. After the round, I will send a document, and that document will contain feedback for each individual speaker. If you wish to not have your feedback be public, please send me a message on Zoom. I will remove the feedback from the document and send it to you privately over Zoom chat that you can then copy into your own document instead. Um, Wonderful. With that being said, let's get started. Hi everyone, my name is Brandon. I'll be your chair for this round. When I call your team, please introduce yourselves in your speaking order, as well as any preferences you have, starting with opening government.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible? First of all.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. So, my name is Sebastian Zhang, and I am the Prime Minister for Prime Minister, and opening governments. And
Hello. Yeah, I'm sorry. So this is Ye Sung-woo. I'm the Deputy Prime Minister for the opening government.
Are you opening opposition?
I am Yuhyuk. I'll be yellow. Chun will be doing yellow.
Closing government?
Hello, my name is Laiba. I'm opening for closing government, and Taeyun will be doing the whip.
And Seo.
Hello, Helen Park. I'm going to do a member of opposition, and Sumo will going to do a whisper.
Wonderful. If there are no further questions, Prime Minister, whenever you're ready, you're here.
all right. So, yeah. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, as our current society continues to experience growth in terms of both population and economic growth, the system in which it grew under is becoming increasingly dominant, which is capitalism. So, as previous generations who have struggled under the system to fulfill their desires as human beings with simply monetary incentives, the narratives that individuals should do what they love has become more dominant, and as they spread what they believe after the experience under the current system, and we as government support that narrative. So firstly, what we say the narrative entails of is pushing people to push their passions and do what they want without worrying about monetary incentive or societal pressure. What this narrative does not entail is any illegal behavior under the current law or encouraging activities that directly harm other people. So our burden within this debate is why individual happiness and bodily autonomy or freedom outweighs the potential financial burden that they might face or the instability that they may face under the current system. So my first point is that happiness within the individual leads to more productivity and allowing them to still thrive under the system. So as individuals pursue passions or what they love and what they enjoy, and that if that activity is encouraged by other people, it will obviously increase the individual happiness. And why this happiness is important? Because the happiness would lead to motivation, and motivated individuals naturally lead to increase in quality of the work done and the efficiency in which the work is completed. And why this is important is because as we mentioned, the potential burden these individuals might face within society by pursuing their freedom, or pursuing their courages might be niche or not very popular in terms of what brings financial stability. And because despite these drawbacks, as individuals pursue what they love, because of the natural increase in the quality of the work done and the rate at which the work is done, we believe it can still counter the potential burdens that could be caused by the fact that this activity is not widely supported or seen as a stable economic or choice.
Wait,
And so, yeah.
then how does this narrative change any of the economic outlooks of these jobs?
And, oh, okay. So regarding that, the reason why these jobs are currently not as popular or do not bring in as much money is simply because there are not as many people who are within those fields, or not many people actively buying into these fields. And why? So the change we cause through these more by motivating individuals to pursue these fields is that more and more people would actively buy into these fields. There will be more and more people participating, therefore leading to the economic growth within that certain sector. So the impact of this argument is that, despite the drawbacks that individuals may experience in the future, um, it would lead to a more productive society in the sense that people would do what they want, do what they love, be happy, and still thrive under the current system without facing any drawbacks. My second argument is that underrepresented sectors will grow, allowing societal diversification or innovation that has not previously existed. So, because, as I've mentioned, that within the society, our main driving factor that has been passed on through generations was monetary incentives. And as people experience life under that system, they face many regrets in the sense that they were not able to do what they love. They were forced by the societal pressure to go into these fields that they are not happy with but could bring in money. So now, by encouraging these individuals to actually pursue what they want rather than going into these broad fields in which they do not enjoy, firstly, that would lead to an increase of population within underrepresented sectors, yeah. So as more and more people dive into these underrepresented sectors, it will lead to more growth. And because different people have different niches and what they enjoy, it will not just lead to one specific field, but
Go
it
on.
would lead to many. It's taken.
But can this kind of narrative actually the change of capitalistic value in the society, for example, the demand from the workplace for more efficient workers or whatnot, will people opt into the kind of like literature or such sectors magically because of this thing?
We are not trying to escape the capitalist system, but rather we are just encouraging people to do what they want. And the reason why such jobs, such as blue collar jobs, would not necessarily disappear or see a decrease in popularity is because monetary incentives still exist. What we are trying to push is a world where, despite the monetary incentives, people should still pursue what they want. And there's plenty of people, despite even, let's say, without the monetary incentives, such as men, who would still opt into blue collar field because it is what they love. So we are not necessarily trying to kill one sector for the growth of the other. So as I mentioned, as more and more different niches start to grow, it leads to a more diverse society because one sector will not be overpopulated and it would be very diverse, which yeah, and societal diversification is important because of the representations of different cultures that could stem from these yeah such from these increase in population, such as arts, but that may have not been explored due to the narrative or the monetary incentive. And yeah, so my sub point is that this would lead to more innovation. And the reason why it would lead to more innovation is because innovation comes from people who work hard within the field. They try to create something new to try almost lead to the growth or change of that field. And the reason why innovation had previously not existed within these fields is simply because there were not enough people or not enough passionate people within these fields. So as more and more people start to opt into these fields, what they love, and spend more time doing it, the time spent doing it could lead to more innovations within these fields. And obviously, as more innovation happens within certain fields, they would be able to rise up even higher, and it would be able to balance out the capitalistic inequalities that exist between these current fields and existing fields that are popular in terms of monetary incentives. So what this would ultimately lead to is a very balanced society in which many different aspects of work or fields are respected and are able to bring in financial stability. So yeah. So what we need from side opposition is to prove why uh, stability right now is better than the benefits that firstly come from the productivity and the freedom
Sorry to
of
cut you off.
is my time up?
Mm.
Okay, yeah. So done.
Alrighty. Speakers, please remember to time yourselves as well as each other. Thank Prime Minister, call leader of opposition here.
Hi, can I check that I'm audible?
You are indeed audible.
Thank you. I'll take POIs verbally. I don't look at chat. Starting my speech in three, two, one. If government side wants to claim that the economic system is going to like their people are going to be happy because they get jobs that they want, it is also their burden to prove that these sectors are then going to be profitable for the individual because of this narrative, and I don't think they ever did that. Two important pieces of framing and some rebuttals. Number one is that I think this narrative mostly looks like, and I think government side concedes to this to some extent, is that you should do what you love for a living. So I think that's the major way in which this narrative usually manifests itself. The second piece of framing is that this thing that you love is often going to be unrealistic or difficult to achieve in the status quo. If it were easy right now, then probably this narrative wouldn't exist in the first place. So probably like this narrative is going to encourage people to do something that is very difficult to do or have very low chances of success for a living. So it's inherently a very high risk situation for these individuals. What opposition is going to prove is that within a capitalist society that is likely not going to change on both sides, individuals are more likely to make bad decisions when this narrative exists. What does government tell you? I think there are mainly two things. Number one is that people will be more happy, but this isn't proven at all because the prerequisite of people being happy because they made the right decision for themselves is that they can get that job that they want. But the only mech for them actually saying like these people are going to get jobs is that more people opt into the things that they love, which grows the market. But in order for a market to grow, people have to demand things, not supply things. An increase of suppliers in a certain industry means that it just gets harder for each supplier to actually get opportunities in the first place. So if their argument is to say that more people like are now opting into art or music, then probably it'll be more difficult as you for you as a musician to succeed amidst more more competition in that industry. The second argument that they bring up is that then like similar to their argument about like happiness, is like similar flaws with their argument about happiness is that then like these sectors will end up growing. But same analysis here is that if a sector doesn't grow because more people are producing things within that sector, sectors grow because they demand certain things and there's more people buying into those products. As long as the demand stays relatively the same, the industry is very, very unlikely to grow. And if more people opt in, and then it is actually more likely that these people have lower chances at success. Then, how does this decision harm people? I think it harms people on two different levels. One is that at decision making, they're likely to be making bad decisions, and regardless of which decision that they make, secondly, after decision making is likely to harm them. Number one, how does this harm them at decision making? I think that people are generally just very, very likely to overestimate their odds at success. This is precisely because there's a selection bias of people that are going to be feeding you this narrative. Because when you think about the types of people that are feeding you this narrative, it's likely going to be people that have done what they've loved before in their lives and succeeded already, right? This means that a very, very strong selection bias appears, where even if like only 1% of the people ended up succeeding while taking that route, the only people that you're hearing from on social media or some other places or like job fairs or stuff like that are going to be the people who actually made it out of that process, which means that there's an overwhelming majority of successful narratives rather than failure stories. So probably the reasons that these people succeeded are going to be other things, like, like they were from a rich family, or like they were just naturally very talented in that place, in that area. But like these factors are very, very ungeneralizable to the general public, which means that if an average everyday person were to make that same decision, they are very, very unlikely to succeed, which means that opting into that industry itself is a very bad choice. The second thing is that people likely are going to underestimate two things. Number one is that you underestimate how much you actually like that certain thing that you love. Because most likely people just like the things that they have as hobbies. For example, if you like sports, or if you like music, or if even like if you like debate, right? You like it as a hobby, but it's very, very different from what you like if you're going to like it as a profession. Obviously, if you do it as a profession, and the second thing is that there are many differences as doing it as a profession. At the point at which you opt into something as a profession, obviously you have to try much, much harder. It becomes a pressure point in your life rather than a thing that you escape from the pressures of your life from. And therefore probably you're very unlikely, even if you opt into this, you're very unlikely to love it in the same way you did before you opted into it. So probably you're underestimating the amount that you actually want to opt in the first place. And this is also why government's argument about how blue collar jobs, because there are going to be people who love blue collar jobs, the labor like balance is going to stay the same. It's quite ridiculous, because obviously if you let people do what you want willy-nilly, then probably like more people are going to be opting into things that mostly people enjoy as hobbies, like sports and like music and stuff like that. And blue collar jobs are just hard. No one loves a blue collar job. And therefore, the labor balance is not, argument coming from their side is quite ridiculous as well. The impact of all of this is the massive opportunity cost that individuals have to face, is that they have to give up certain like more likely ways of making a living. And if this fails, which is very, very likely, probably then they're going to be wasting their life and they're going to have a very hard time. Secondly, it hurts them after decision making, because number one, they're very likely to fail. As I said before, you have very high opportunity costs. You're going to forego things like job education in more likely, more stable like places. And also, I think that the second more important thing is that the impact of a narrative is that it makes you regret the unavoidable and wise choices that you made before. Maybe you gave up on the music career that you've always wanted to. Maybe you didn't become a rock and roll star, but you like when society keeps telling you that you should have done what you loved when you were 20 or when you were 30 and now you're 40, 50, although the choice to become a 9 to 5 office worker was probably the right choice to make, people tend to regret that. And that's why people fall into midlife crises and people start to regret their entire life trajectories. And I think this kind of unrealistic narrative, and probably most people don't have the capacity or the bravery or, frankly speaking, stupidity to opt into like things very like risky endeavors like art and stuff like that. But for the vast majority of people, it's about this narrative impacts how they look upon their lives rather than what kinds of decisions that they make. And at the point at which this makes midlife crises and the pain of being stuck in the capitalist system much, much worse, I think that even after decision making, even if you make the correct decision, this narrative is likely going to harm you rather than benefit you. For all these reasons, very proud to oppose.
Tech Leader of Opposition called DPN right here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, thank you so much. For the POI, I'm trying to take your POIs from the chat, but there's a possibility I cannot check the chat. So if you really want to having the raising your POI, first do by your chat, and if I didn't take your POI, please let me know in the verbally. What the opposition failed to realize is that the narrative shapes reality, and by rejecting "do what you love" narrative, and they're defending the world where fulfillment is luxury, not a right, and they are also seeing the individual in our society as a work consumed by the work and capitalisms, and they're just limited their own personal capability and possibility on the world. So The opening oppositions are having two ideas from their own reviewer. First would be the devastating of the economic system, and they said about this kind of narratives are not really profitable and so unrealistic to challenging in our real life. However, I want to mention that this kind of generation, this kind of industries are like digital culture, startup creations. They are from starting their own love, which means their own passion and enthusiasm, not just like their own for the real life and monetary reasons. So it means that do what they want and do what they really love. They will find their niche area and mix elite innovations. And also in the end impact, they will have an economic system, the rising of the economic system, do what they want from day one. So here as a DPM, I would like to give you my speech from some reviewer points from the opening opposition, and I will give you extensions about what our Prime Minister suggested earlier in his speech. First, there are mentions about two types of things that industries are not likely to grow and is harmful in their individuals. First would be like having some decision making would be the bad ideas, and the second was like impact on after they having decision making. We want to mention that they're having some gap. There mentions about some estimate people individual or overestimate their success and strong selections. However, I think this is the way to make a self-actualization from their own life, not just a sacrificing from the capitalisms. So here we're not denying some the appreciation of our economic system and capitalism's their ideologies. We're not denying these ideas. However, we want to suggest and we want to support advocating about coexistence about their individual happiness as a worker and as a human being. And also they mentions about they might regret their own choices. However, we want to mention that they are limited and they have denying about lessons learned from the people, from the individual lessons. So I would like to give you our main argument and extensions. First of all, about individual happiness. When people choose work or life paths they based on their passion, their daily life will be more appreciated and more purposeful with some strong satisfyings. So as a long-term view, not only sacrificing real life for their own money as a worker in their workplace, they can further satisfying their own work and their own daily life. So it makes people make a sustainable lifestyle and makes a more healthier society. So I'd like to give you 2 points of what do what they love. The first would be their job about what they can leading the social innovations. So we can select a startup and art like creation part. They are starting from own do what they love. So Apple, Amazon, they kind of very renowned startup places are there from passion and enthusiasm. So we cannot deny that this kind of dominant narrative will be diminishing and leading of devastating of the economic systems. So this kind of niche area and what they find with from their own heart, it will be leading a great point and great part of innovation in our society. So the second would be the hobby. So thank you for mentioning opening oppositions mentions about hobby also. However, we want to pointing out that it can be releasing their own stresses and sustain their own life, not only relying their own like routinely going to the work and back from the work. And this kind of ideas are really stressful and individual. And at the end of the day, when we are not advocating and supporting this narrative, they will having some burden and having some stress from their own small life, and they cannot actualizing themselves. And what the point that our the opening government is burden is about the social gap between like social structures, what the opening opposition already mentioned to us. However, I think this is the chance, this is the way, and this is the passage to realizing about how social structures are really inequality to our life. So the reason why we support and advocating this dominant narrative, do what they love is, first would be some self-actualization of the human being and release their stress and life appreciated from their work and their life. However, as a big term, as a social social norm and social viewpoint of as a bigger point, we can make this rebel structure violence and inequality from this dominant narrative. Since you mentioned about the wealthier people and they like some hobbies and some job really need their for the big money and for their wealthier lives. However, when people feel that kind of social narrative exposes inequality and drive reforms, it isn't just like personal advice, but it narrative creates a discomfort. So when people hear it, this kind of narrative, they might ask themselves, why can't I? And they just this kind of questions will break the mindset of quiet survival. So it makes people really uncomfortable get between what they want and what they really allowed to have. So they will acknowledging about this kind of social gap between themselves and some inequality in our structural violence, and it could be because the political area so may some policies about class, unequal education, safety nets, and what they never had before when this dominant narratives arise before. So this is the chance and pressure to change. Social starting asking about what needs to happen so more people can follow the law, not just sacrificing their own work and life. For this reason, we're proud to propose.
Take DPM, Cordula.
I am audible.
Yep, whenever you're ready.
Thanks. Starting my speech in three, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We tell children to dream whatever they want. If children tells us that they want to be a fire truck, not a firefighter, we say yes, because it's the matter of trade-off. If you're dreaming something and if you're aiming for something, if you become an adult, what you want is not the only thing you should consider. Let me clarify what this narrative actually means, because government depicted literally nothing about this. There are a lot of societal pressures. For example, you should think about what you can do, you should think about what you should do, you should think about what you want to do. These kind of three values are decided by individual decision of value judgment when deciding job career or making an important decision in their lives. None of this is unimportant. For example, if you choose something you cannot do, obviously you're going to fail. If you choose something you are not supposed to do, or if you choose to not to do what you should do, maybe it means that your responsibility is failing. Your surrounding people will suffer. The thing that choosing the thing you want to do is also important. However, the opposition strongly believes that this kind of value judgment should be done in the way that individual can actually measure these kind of values in equal way, contextualized way individually, not the societal pressure and societal emphasis on what they want to do, which totally neglects what they actually can do or what they should do. What happens is pretty simple. This narrative changes a few stupid people's minds, but it does not really change the world itself. The government keeps saying that, oh, maybe the societal structure will change. Oh, maybe the capitalistic structure will change, but that is extremely unlikely. I strongly believe that my leader of the opposition successfully broke that down, but let me explain that once more. First, let's think about how workplaces choose people. We are agreeing upon the point that we are both living in a capitalistic society. It means that workplaces are going to choose people based on the efficiency, based on the productivity. This kind of thing will not change. And this kind of premium on efficiency is likely to exist also in their separate world. So what happens is pretty simple. First, it is unlikely that workplaces are now magically going to hire the like YOLO guys. Second, maybe they want to say that, oh, music industry is going to grow. No, this is obviously not true, because first, the one who consumes the hobby will reduce, because you now, as our leader of the opposition mentioned before, your hobby is not your hobby anymore. Second, even if they can opt in some extent, supply cannot actually grow the market itself. What depends the market sustainability is demand, and they're mentioning nothing about how demand will be shifted in their separate world. Okay, moving on to the direct responses. First, I want to symmetricize the pressures, which is their main push. The opening government mentioned that pressures will exist. You're going to be unhappy. So for the happiness, you should do whatever you want to do. First, pressure is pretty symmetric. First reason why pressure is symmetric is because there's a monetary instability having stronger on opening government side. Opening government, though they're trying to respond that, oh, if you become happy in your workplace, maybe you're going to be happier. But monetary instability brings you existential threat, basically. You cannot pay for what you can eat, what you should eat. And also, basically, monetary instability that is likely to happen in their side of the world is likely to be their own fault because you choose what you want to do. Now you have full responsibility, even diminishing your own choice, regretting it. So I don't know how happiness is extremely exclusive benefit in opening government. Second reason why pressure will exist bigger in opening government is because you have basically no scapegoats from your city situation in your workplace. Before that, if you feel very, very bad in your workplace, you can just go debate. Sorry, debate is my hobby. You can just go debate. But now, if you take that as job, if you have to teach debate, now that kind of thing is likely to lose a premium as hobby, which means that you are likely to feel more pressure. Second, in that kind of situation with more pressure that comes from the existential threat from monetary instability, you have no scapegoat. You have no hobbies to rely on. And let's talk about the sectors. Deputy Prime Minister mainly mentioned that many sectors basically start from love, for example, Steve Jobs creating Apple. This is totally wrong because love is not the only thing that creates Apple. What created Apple is creativity and obviously luck, monetary incentive, and also the shift of the world itself. Which means that for success to be measured, it should be compared in various aspects. We have to think about first, what were the situation? Second, what were the other factors except for the love? Or what kind of talent that person had? What kind of creativity that person had? However, this kind of narrative is likely to create a selection bias, which means that this kind of narrative will only focus on the fact that, oh, Steve Jobs liked Apple, Steve Jobs liked IT, so Apple was able to succeed. But we should remember that there are millions of the chunk of people who fail to create a startup and eventually ruin their whole life. The opening government is totally neglecting this point. So many sectors starts from above. First, unlikely because of the possibility issue. There are a lot of other factors. However, in the delivery process, those kind of other factors will be totally neglected, which means that these kind of individuals are likely to fail. Second, even the sector cannot grow. Moving on to the point about self-actualization. Opening government is just blindly saying that self-actualization brings you this failure, and try and error will bring you a self-actualization. But Judge, as you can check in your note, there are no mechanism how this kind of failure and monetary crisis brings you a self-actualization. I believe that what enables self-actualization is when you try to think about what you can do, what you should do, and also what you want to do. This kind of three factors should be balanced according to the value judgment equally, not only focusing on what you want. So the opening opposition was able to prove sustainability point because, as I mentioned before, what you love is unlikely to be sustainable in terms of job sustainment or even about yourself. So what you like right now is not likely to be the thing that you like within 5 years, within 10 years. And also, job is not only about love. So due to this kind of factors, what will happen in opening government world is pretty simple. First, the people who will be majorly affected by this kind of narrative, who are young adults who just opt into the society and engaging into capitalistic like workplaces. Second, the people who have a midlife crisis. Those kind of most vulnerable individual in terms of monetary stability and in terms of the mental stability will be harmed because of the high opportunity cost they have to bear and the low possibility of success. And these kind of people's harm will be even enlarged in their world because because now it's their full responsibility and they have no hobby to rely on anymore. So proud to oppose.
Ready. Nagila, Bungie, here.
Hello, am I audible enough?
Yes.
All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Throughout this debate, we've come up with a lot of assertions. For example, what defines success or what doesn't define success, if jobs are based on love or if jobs aren't based on love. But ignoring all of those things, I'd like to talk about the few deadlocks that we've received throughout this debate from both of the opening sides and also bring a few questions, starting with how even though this narrative might be dominant, is it really coming to fruition under this capitalistic society or not? Before I move on to my own positive extensions, I'd like to talk about the first idea, which is happiness is equals to productivity, right? The first and foremost idea presenting by opening government, which was essentially the idea that if someone is more happy, they're going to be more productive, and if they're more productive, they're going to succeed in society in terms of finances and otherwise, which the other side, rightfully so, brought up to how is this going to bring up a more economic benefit or a more financial benefit for them to sustain or make this their long-term goal, right? The second one was the idea that innovation and diversification is brought about more and more if someone does what they actually love, even if this is something like a blue-collar job, even if this is something like that doesn't necessarily have a lot of demand, essentially just creating this idea of supply, which opening opposition then was like, oh, like if you keep on giving supply, if the demand doesn't exist, there's just going to be saturation of that thing in the market, and they're not going to be able to financially succeed. These were the foremost points in like the practical aspect of this argument, right? But the main problems, the more practical problems then came down to other things like, oh, like people are going to make bad decisions. People are going to overestimate their like odds of success because people are going to be feeding them these ideas like, oh, if you do this certain thing, then you're going to be able to climb the ladder, and you're going to essentially be being like underestimating what you actually like in life, and you're going to be pursuing that because people are going to tell you that this is what is going to give you a self of fulfillment, right? Given that we agree with the opening government narrative of yes, you should do what you love, we're going to bring our own extensions while tackling what opening opposition said. The first thing that I'll be dealing with is the idea of demand and supply, right? In under a capitalistic society, the easiest thing to create in society is demand, right? Like 2 months ago, you wouldn't know what a fucking labubu was, but now everyone has it, everyone wants it, but, just because people created that demand, right? That demand is created when you create trends. That demand is created when you keep on doing something that is different, which is essentially going to be the core of our debate today, right? You need to shape perceptions and make this dominant actually exist in a society, right? Throughout this debate, we forgot that even though people keep telling you, do what you love, do what you're good at, do what you want to do in life, especially in societies that Asia, you're less likely to actually go out and pursue that because you're scared of failure. Your parents are going to tell you to do something that is going to garner you status, that is going to garner you financial stability, that is going to garner you a place in society so that you can be happy, right? But the very problem with this notion is the fact that you don't get a self of fulfillment or a sense of purpose, which is something that is very important. And for our extension of psychological sense of fulfillment or sense of purpose, this is what we're going to be talking about, right? If you don't have a sense of purpose in society, you're more likely going to be depressed, you're more likely going to be less productive. And even if you're able to engage in the economic aspect of society, being a productive member of it, you're not going to be happy, right? So we're more likely to argue that happiness, while happiness doesn't necessarily lead to productivity, it's still important to have a sense of purpose in order to keep on going into society, in order to like make sure that you don't end up killing yourself. And because we live in a capitalistic society, the thing that takes up most of our time is our job. The thing that takes up most of our time is studying and being a productive member of it. So it should, at the very least, be something that gives you some sense of fulfillment, right? And how do we ensure that, right? While we understand opening opposition's points of like you're not going to be like financially stable, and I'm assuming because most of them are assertions, I'm assuming that this leads to the idea that you, in order to be happy, you do need money. We also need to take in consideration how the capitalistic society looks like, right? People have more than one stream of income, and at the very least, at least one of them should be like a stream of income doing something that you love, right? Because it's hard as it is existing to like create like financial stability, which leads me to like my next kind of rebuttal, which is like, what do you define success by, right? Is
it just being someone that is like the owner of Apple, someone that is a CEO, someone that is doing something and creating a million empire? Or is it just like being financially stable enough to go out and do something that you like after that, be able to create a family and support that family, right? The second thing is then the idea that the economic outcomes on opening government don't change. I'm going to bring to you our extension and how these economic outcomes on our side can change, coupled with the fact that I just told you about how we can create or change demand, right? In a capitalistic society, we're also looking at people being oversaturated in job markets, right? Most people are going to enter a college and they're going to choose a major like CS. In UIC, economics is one of the largest departments in the entire college, right? In most of Sky universities, the largest departments are either medicine, engineering, law, or computer science, right? And this just shows you that even though all of these people earn their spot in these colleges, they're not the most, they're still going to have similar levels of skills. What that's going to do is then that the cream of the top, like the people that are going to do the very best out of all of these places, they're going to be the ones that are going to be super successful. The rest of them are just going to be maybe minutely successful and still not going to be happy than what they're doing. So then that presents us the idea that if both sides of the coin, you're going to be just minutely like economically or financially successful, why not do something that gives you a sense of purpose? Because if the monetary value on both sides is the exact same, then what is like what is doing something that is more accepted by society presenting you towards, right? Then the other thing, the last point is the doom of society, right? Something that like you're going to keep on doing something that other people are going to tell you. You're going to keep on absorbing the information that they're regurgitating towards you just because you know that there is this sliver of chance that you might succeed at it. Anything that opening opposition said was not necessarily true, right? Sure, people don't like do their jobs out of love, but you don't necessarily know if they're going to succeed at something like medicine or like other things either. You might just be miserable and you might not succeed either. And then the thing is that people, if they're more prone to choose things like psychiatry and psychology over things like sociology, just because one offers them a job or something of that sort, it's going to create like a more individualistic mindset where people are just going towards these fields where you're not really understanding what is happening in society. You're encouraging everyone to go towards the same side of society or like a similar set of fields. And while we agree that like the demand just doesn't exist, it's just going to keep on staying that way. We agree that like it might create like a surplus of supply in the beginning, but that's not something that we shouldn't just change, right? It's something that we should actively move towards to change. What have we proven to you today? We've proven to you three things. Number one, that it can that on our side, pursuing something that you can love may have some sort of economic benefit, right? Because if you keep on doing something that you love, something that is innately different, and you keep on going towards it, you're going to stand out. You're going to get a job. You're going to be better in society, and the supply and the demand might just be increased. Number two, that sense of purpose is important, and people are already suffering because of like epidemics of like mental health bouts and things like that because they're not doing what they like. And number three, that like all of the things that like were said on both sides were more or less assertions, but if you put them in a caricature and if you really see and like weigh on which side you can move out like towards like something that you like and also create some level of financial stability, closing government wins because of all of these reasons for side proposition. Thank you.
Thank MG, Kalamo, you're here.
Hi. Okay. Just give me some 10 seconds, please. Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So the opposing government said that even though this narrative is dominant, people will still this monetary value equal as in the status quo is right now. However, I think this is really unrealistic because when this narrative is dominant, then people will value their desire and ideology more than realistic values such as like consider about their how many budget is left on my bank account, like those kinds of things. So those kinds of realistic problems or realistic value will be less considered in these people's mind, and it will be in less priority. So I don't really think that the closing government's case is really matters with today's motion and is really realistic. Now moving on to our side's main argument. So the first extension and first argument we're going to push is that if we follow this new narrative like that, people have to do what they want. This will going to stigmatization weak people who wants to follow their heart but not really able to do because of their like economic status or their realistic problem. So first, chasing dream is really expensive. So everyone's dream, like the opening opposition also mentioned. So everyone dream big and everyone dream very ideal types of dream. Like I want to be a president, I want to be a billionaire in the future, and everyone dream kind of like a fantastic dreams. So however, in reality, average people and most of these average people and some of these poor people can't really afford to these dreams, even though they also want to achieve this big dream. However, under this new narrative, the society and everyone else will going to push them to follow their ideal dream, no matter about their true circumstance or their true like status or true resource that they can actually invest to achieve this dream. For example, you're a poor family and your child wants to do a ballet or F1. And as a parent, you cannot really say no to your child or no to your kid because oh sorry, because we're so poor, our family is so poor, we cannot really help you achieve your dream. Because this is a society, this is the dominant narrative that like even though you ask to other people or like teachers or everyone else around you, everyone will going to say that, oh, you should do your kid what they want. You should invest all your money to make your kid's dream achieve. Now, because now society will going to blame those parents if they are not able to help their kids, then they will going to blame this parent as a bad parent. You're really a bad parent. You don't deserve your kid or whatever. And also, so then this family have to waste their time and money to this unreachable dreams such as doing a ballet or F1. And also those kids, even though her or his body is not real physical thing is not really good to do a ballet or some kind of things, but still these kids also have to waste their time and effort on stalking on this unreachable dream. And why it's really bad and why it's really detrimental to these weak people. First, because it makes them to waste their time and effort, which is really important to their important to this economic status of people, and also make them just following unreachable dream. And second is because this also takes away the chance to make success or achieve or make an achievement by doing something affordable or what they can do actually in a realistic view. And also why carrying these minorities are more important in today's debate is because rich people or fluent people can, no matter what the narrative is, they can still going to live flourish, and they have more chance and more resource to put to actually make their high hopes and make their big dreams achievable. However, for those poor and rich people, they also have to feel defeated by comparing themselves with these very few rich peoples, and they also have to get stigmatized by the society as they're bad or as they're like very weak, and you're very just don't have enough ability to make a success. And now what only left for these minorities is their lose resources and their unhappiness and a failure, which is really far from the benefit the government today argued. Now moving on to our second point. So our main second point is that these kinds of social narrative can actually going to harm the work efficiency, which government really pushed strong in today's debate. So the government mainly say that by more people choose the jobs what they actually want, so it will be more efficiency and because they will going to work hard. However, this do what they want and social narrative can also lead people to follow their like a like a desire or hurt, which means that now all people wants to make success, but in an easy way. They don't really want to invest lots of time to get this amount of salary or kind of things. So in job, every workers wants to take rest and chill in their home watching Netflix, but still wants to get salary. And all the workers wants to avoid those hard works and wants to go home early. So also the deputy Prime Minister also mentioned in her speech that those kinds of repetitive life and always going to job and come back to their home is kind of stressful and boring. However, we believe that this job environment will actually going to be still same in this government size worldwide, because people might feel different with what they actually dream and maybe get tired about this repetitive life, and also might lose their interest even though they actually adopted into this job market at first because of their hard wants. However, this can also be changed. So in the government's world, then workers will find a way to do a less work and toast some hard works to someone else and avoid their duty. Yes, some enthusiasm people who love to do their work will do their duty, but I think this kind of benefit is symmetric in the both sides world, because enthusiasm people will keep work hard no matter what social narrative is. And also, like opposition, also like always said, like most people are not really super intelligent, super passionate people. So therefore, in this narrative, these kinds of most and average people will get free from this pressure and get far away from this realistic burden pressure. So they don't really have any kind of check and balance system to actually work hard, and therefore we believe that under this social narrative, the average worker's work efficiency will get lower. However, in our size world, at least they will feel pressure and environment that you have to do your responsibility and duty, and because the realistic problem makes those people keep to their work. So basically, so therefore, we believe that we can at least secure certain amount of responsibility within also related to the efficiency. Thank you.
Moko.
Am I audible?
Yep, when I'm
Yeah.
ready.
I'll start my speech with basically what the CEO is claiming to be. I'll start with the refute, and that is against the CEO, which can be divided into two. First is that they're pointing out the realistic point that the poor, focusing on the poor, that they're worrying about them getting stigmatized by the societal socioeconomic status of them, actually blocking them to actually achieve something from which is against the narrative, making them to be oppressed once again. But to this point, there are two arguments that we want to make. Is first is the overall societal utility, which the opposition is practically disregarding. So by weakening this narrative of the doing what we actually love, is actually neglecting the potential of the change that the society could embrace, which is currently dominated by the capitalist, very monetarized value system, which needs to be which is not very healthy for each society to actually sustain their system in the first place. They do not consider this narrative having the potential for societal recognition to change and the governmental support to actually be given to those who are in the societal weak status. And the second point that we want to make is because they only focus on certain status as only focusing on the poor who can actually not do anything, but be rather lack in their capability, because they only focus on these societal hierarchy. The OO and CO are actually creating a dual oppressive system that those poor people will not have money or they will also not have even the chance of opportunity to realize their capability that could be potentially be within themselves, that cannot be fully expressed throughout in the society due to their oppressive system in capitalism. The second point the CEO makes is that the efficiency of the working will actually be harmed, and they're presuming
as if the societal laborers will be very lazy and they will not actually, if they do not actually achieve their goal, or if they're not in the environment to actually be treated as if as fully as they want to, they will not fully commit themselves into certain tasks, which will lessen the efficiency. But this argument actually contradicts this societal condition that they keep on pushing for in the first place, which is about the realistical point regarding that capitalism is how the society functions right now. And according to that, this second argument actually does not make sense in the regarding this current monetarized value system of the society. Moving on to our the points that we can make on regarding why this why the closing government is having a better alternative world than uh, the OO and CO can be divided into two. The first is the structural dimension, which is about this without this narrative, the hierarchy of the society will be worsened. So instead of OO and CO, while they are stuck into this framework of capitalism and having stick on to this outcome-based value judgments, as the O as the OO actually keep on mentioning that in order for the survival, there needs to be productivity, and for the OG actually mentioning the happiness actually motivating people to lead to productivity and efficiency. All they provide is what is perpetuating the cycle of capitalism, and this CG wants to point out that this narrative problem is not just about this outcome-based results and argument making, but rather about how to liberalize people within the system, how to make a bit of how to have a bit of a potential in the change of the system, which is oppressing people due to creating the hierarchy. So instead of with this narrative, instead of people blindly following certain routes that the society have created, they will have the purpose, they will have this chance through this narrative to find what they actually want to do. It is not most of the cases where people do not actually attempt to do something is not because of the financial burden, but rather because of the societal recognition towards them as the failure. So and if if this without this narrative, the perpetuating of this simplify this without this narrative, societal purpose itself will be simplified as if humans are to be keep on pursuing this efficiency and productivity and only in terms of only the economical terms. And the second knowing that you have the potential itself has will actually have demand in the society, and this will actually allow you to supply according to what the society actually necessitates for each individuals to create in the value system, actually paving the way for the new possibilities. And this is why we're proud to propose.
I got what call up here.
Am I audible?
Yep, you're here.
So I'm gonna start in, wait, no. You can do POIs in any way you. Okay, so I'm going to explain why it is the case that CG takes this motion today in two steps. first, I'm going to engage upon what the CG has currently said upon about our case. Then I'm going to do a house by house comparison as to why our case is simply better than all the other side of the benches, and also compared to the OO as well. Okay, so engaging with CG, I think they bring a few points into this debate, talking about how that people should have some stream of income from what they love, and which I don't think they provide a good enough, sufficient enough mech as to why this is actually true in the first place, and also that and how that yeah, why it is the case that it's even likely that people are able to get a successful job of a stream of income from what they love in the first place. And they talk about about our case for a case on stigmatization, how that our side neglects the potential for society to change. But I don't think this is realistic on their side of the world, because I think we're both debating on the preemption that it is a capitalistic society, and that in both sides of the world, probably there's going to be some people doing what they want in the first place, right? Even if there's no dominant narrative, if people have some want to do something, they probably might be able to do that in as a form of living, right? And and at least on our side of the world compared to theirs, since there is no dominant narrative that you should do this, I think the people who actually opt into creating new industries in the first place are the people who actually have the means and the capabilities to do in the first place, which means that the likelihood that they're going to succeed to actually innovate this kind of industry in the first place and create actual success by doing what they want in the first place is much higher on our side of the world. And they try to and they fail to actually explain why it is why it is in the case of our side of the world that people will just automatically fall into a system where people just do what earns them money. Of course, this is going to be true for a lot of the case, but I think that it's equal on terms that people are still going to be able to do what they want, but at least on our side of the world, people are going to have much more success. Then they talk about how the structural element on how it's outcome based, and people blindly follow what seems to be better. But I think this isn't a really good case for their side of the argument as well, because first of all, I think it's equally true that people can't really see what's going to happen in the future. So we can be said that we are on both sides of the world, people are blindly following a career path, whether it is something that they like or don't. But at least on our side of the world, at least there's some assurance that there's actually a chance, at least a small a larger chance that we are actually to make a living for ourselves instead of starving because we decided to take an art major and wanted to become a big artist, even though it is not really realistic on the other hand. So I don't think the CG brings many meaningful cases to this debate. Now I'm going to go over OG, then over and to explain why the opposition side wins overall. OG tries to bring in the argument that it brings more productivity and innovation, but as we are into niche industries. But I think we already mentioned how niche industries also still exist in the first. Well, first I want to tackle that. I think OO does a good job in explaining why it is in the first case that demand simply can't just without demand and an excess of supply can't just create a new industry in the first place. But even if it were true, I think we are successfully able to point out that it's symmetrical in that people already do what they want. But on our side of the world, I think but because of the work efficiency, that it harms work efficiency, and because that people tend to avoid responsibilities in the first place. I think that there's an exclusive harm that people give up the responsibilities that are actually necessary for people to actually live in the first place, right? Such as their basic duty to care for their family. And instead, they are more likely to opt into things that are much more niche, as the OG tries to push. And I think the harm on their side of the world that even if it does benefit some niche industries, I think it comes with the downside that people actually opt into a mindset where they're much more likely to much more likely to abandon their responsibilities and not realize how unrealistic it is to actually find success within these kind of niche industries in the first place. Then I want to talk about how I think that okay, so let's move on into the so overall, I think that's why the opposition takes the case over government in the first place. So now I'm going to move on into the comparison between CO and OO. I think overall, the OO tries to bring a strong case as to the why people might overestimate their odds of success and how it might change their individual level. But I think what CO brings over OO in the debate overall is that we bring a much more wider and better impacted case as to why it would actually harm society as a whole. And I think we are able to take this into and that we have a much deeper and wider impact. First of all, I think that we are successfully able to bring up the point on stigmatization, where we bring the realistic point which we mentioned the points that the government brings upon, like such as a societal class and how and this part I don't think OO properly engages upon this on how the societal class really is impacted by this dominant narrative. But I think our case of stigmatization really brings how people who don't have the capabilities are actually trying to reach dreams that are too expensive that they can't afford, but because of the dominant narrative that they are forced to actually consider and waste their precious resources that can be spent overall on other much more important issues. So overall, what I think that our side of the bench actually brings is that it actually takes engages upon the case of the government, and also I think that we are able to have a better and wider and much more deeply impacted case compared to the opening opposition. Therefore, proud to oppose.
Alrighty, thanks everyone. I'm gonna take some time, come with a call, type up the feedback, and then I'll come back hopefully quite soon. Alrighty. Can I confirm that I'm audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Um, Thanks everyone. The call is as follows. The first goes to opening opposition. The second goes to opening government. The third goes to closing opposition, and the fourth, unfortunately, to closing government. Although the split was quite close. The reason for the decision is as follows. I'll start with the opening split, and then I'll go down clash by clash. First, on OG versus OO. OG posits two claims, first on efficiency and second on development of underrepresented sectors. The claim from opening government is twofold. Number one, on efficiency, is simply the idea that if you care about what you do, you are much more likely to do either a good job or number two, put more work slash effort into your work. That means ultimately the result is much better because you simply work harder for it or you care more about it. Therefore, you're more willing to do unpaid overtime maybe or something like that. The second argument is the development of underrepresented sectors. And this argument is based on the premise that the reason this narrative exists is because these sectors currently are less profitable than you would want for a career. Therefore, if you have more people that are more willing to go into these sectors, this is generally good because then now it develops these sectors into things that are either more profitable or at the very least more popular. The two claims, or sorry, the main claim from opening opposition, or sorry, the two claims from O is twofold. Number one is that it sets a bad example for regular people that don't have the same like talents or financial capacity to do things that those that succeed otherwise would. And the idea here is that people like Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos succeed because they are extremely talented or have a strong financial backing for the industries that they have worked around in and are able to develop. Such that the average person, as they don't have these abilities, is unlikely to be able to succeed in the same ways that they did and are basing their sort of hope off a false narrative that is unable to be replicated. And that's bad because if they're unable to succeed in the ways that these people who are able to change the industry are, then they're likely to live at a far worse level than they otherwise would be able to. So, for example, if you don't succeed in the music industry, your quality of life will be far worse than if you, for example, took an office job. The second is to note that this narrative causes people to change in ways they otherwise probably would not have. This is the second argument. It's that when you have this narrative and people buy into this narrative, when they're in parts of their life where they're regretting their past decisions. So the example was a 30-year-old office worker that regrets what they quit what they love when they were 20, they're far more likely to go into things like midlife crises, and that's quite bad for stability and just their quality of life as a whole because they're more likely to, uproot their life for ambiguous reasons. This means that with the absence of this narrative, they're far more likely to stay in careers that they're stable in and are sort of able to do other things on their own time when they feel the need slash want to. The way these arguments engage is twofold. Number one is the responsive material from opening opposition is quite effective against opening government, talking about efficiency, but then more importantly, second, about the development of sectors, explaining why it's actually probably likely to have a much worse quality of life otherwise. So ultimately, we have two things. We have one, talking about opening government's case on efficiency and the impact of that, or two, on OO and their impact on stability. And the way that this clash was decided was opening opposition's weighing on stability was quite important. As they explained why weighing or why stability specifically allows you to have a much greater, on average, quality of life than efficiency does, where you probably are more tired, and you probably, even if you are more efficient, the stability is very important for your day-to-day life and how you feel. Let's bring in both closing teams, and I'll bring this up in the feedback as well. But the problem I have with majority of these closing teams is that it's just that the case from both member and both from both members is quite derivative of opening half, such that it's quite hard to credit either of like these speeches very heavily in the round against their opening halves. As such, both of them unfortunately lose it out both their opening teams. But let's talk about how it is that they sort of try to differentiate. Member of government does a few things. Number one, they try to fill in some of the gaps from opening government, which I think is the more reasonable extension in this round. But unfortunately, I think they just fall short in that what they end up doing is sort of repeating the same mechanisms that opening government has, explaining why, people are likely to be more efficient and that results in more happiness because you're doing what you love. Um, the problem I have with that, unfortunately, this is just far too repetitive against opening government's case, where it's very unclear what the creditable material from MG is. Comparatively to closing opposition, there are a few things to note here that are quite good. Number one is even though opening opposition talks about poor people and explains why they're likely to not succeed, uh, open and closing option is able to expand a little more on what this life actually now looks like. How people will be pushed to actually take these chances, and importantly, the opportunity cost of taking these chances. About why people are likely to, still want to feel like, or sorry, why they would still want to succeed, but are less likely to do so. But moreover, they explain why even if you choose to go down these paths, why success might actually not be the most logical, or sorry, why success might be very hard. Explaining how, sometimes you are very tired of the repetitiveness. This analysis comes out in a, but the way CO is able to sort of have this positive material from this analysis is to explain the difference between this and, for example, an office job that is far more stable. They say, look, even if my passion is music, but I go down this music rabbit hole and I find out that it's quite repetitive and I don't like it. The counterfactual is the repetitiveness of an office job. That means the difference is even if I have feel repetitiveness in both jobs, one is far more stable and one is more able to deliver a life that is more achievable compared to if you are very like redundant in a music career, for example, or just something that you love. It's much easier to fail that way as opposed to what we consider a more generic career. The problem then with the whip speakers, I think in general, it's twofold. Number one, specifically with whip, sorry, yeah, specifically with specifically for opposition, there are a few things. Number one, and most importantly, I would say, is the weighing. So the way the weighing that was done in CO seems very surface level, which is to say we have a more broader impact than opening opposition, or we have more depth that affects greater society. And the problem with this analysis is not that it is inherently wrong, just that a lot of these claims are quite assertive, absent of any analysis to back it up. And generally, when we do weighing, a lot of it is based on specific things that we find to be important. So whether scope or scale, and this is done to some extent. But the way that it is weighed is quite different in that a lot of times what you'll see is people trying to rationalize the actual impacts and then comparing them based on these hypothetical numbers. So, for example, opening opposition is able to benefit 100 people through XYZ thing that they said, whereas we on closing opposition are able to benefit 1,000 people based on XYZ thing that we said. And so the reason this matters is because visualizing this weighing trick, explaining how you actually affect these people to this degree, it's much easier to compare the two arguments because there are explicit numbers that you can use that are based on logic, not necessarily empirically true, but based on a likelihood of analysis that you're able to compare the two and go, oh, well, this is very obviously affecting a greater number of people. And even if it isn't as large as Aquip says it is, it's probably still large enough for me to credit this impact to a much greater extent than I would in the otherwise. This weighing feedback applies to both web speakers. And then specifically for Gov, I would say the main thing here is just it's just that it was quite hard to understand the differentiation from opening government, and that's something that really needed to come out in the whip as well. And that because of this, it's very hard to credit closing government with a lot of the impacts they tried to claim because they're very similar to the ones the opening government has claimed already. And because opening government has also done the analysis to explain why they're true, it's very hard to credit closing government with these impacts as well. Are there any questions? If not, I will send the feedback.
Just one announcement before we move on to questions. Brennan, I was just curious on whether you would be sending the feedback to our email or uploading it on the KIDA public forum on Facebook.
I'm going to send it in the chat and then I'll also send it to the email because I believe I'm not in the KIDA forum forum
All
thing.
right, perfect. Yeah. So, are there any questions regarding the OA? Feel free to just unmute your mic. All right, I don't think there are any. So, Brandon, I'll just give you I'll just let you post the feedback on the Zoom chat then.
Sounds good. Let me just change the formatting real quick.
Yep.
And that should be it. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. Sent.
All right. So thank you, Brandon. That would conclude today's lecture and sparring. I know that we went really overtime, so we will coordinate with you on that issue, on that part. But thank you guys for sticking out to the final bits of the spar. I really appreciate you for coming, and we really appreciate Brendan for coming to give us a lecture to hopefully kind of improve our rookie skills all around KIDA. And with that being said, the recording will be uploaded on both YouTube and Facebook. And yeah, we just hope that everybody has a great rest of their day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you for coming.